The wind over the Giza plateau moves slowly at night, carrying the scent of ancient dust. In the moonlight, the sands shift like the surface of a sleeping ocean, the ripples whispering against the massive pores of the great Sphinx. For thousands of years, it has sat here, half lion, half human, facing east toward the rising sun, as if waiting for something, or guarding it. From a distance, the Sphinx is a familiar silhouette, its profile etched into the collective memory of humanity. But up close, under the stillness of night, there is something different, a quiet hum of history, the feeling that the stone itself remembers. We know the Sphinx as a monument, but beneath its silent gaze lie questions that have not been answered, and perhaps truths that have not been spoken. The story you're about to hear is not the tale found in neat history books or museum plaques. It's a journey through what is known, what is guessed, and what is whispered, a journey into the possibility that beneath the stone, hidden from the world for thousands of years, there are tunnels and perhaps chambers that hold the memory of a civilization older than Egypt itself. In daylight, the Sphinx is a tourist landmark, photographed, measured, fenced off, but in darkness, the scene changes. The tourists are gone, the voices fall silent, and the desert becomes what it has always been, vast, timeless, and patient. It is in these hours, under the silver glow of the moon, that the mind begins to wander toward the improbable. Could there truly be something beneath this colossus? Could a passage carved in the bedrock lead to rooms sealed before history began? Ancient Egyptian priests called the Sphinx She-Sepenk, the living image. In their religion, statues and monuments were not mere stone, they were vessels, guardians. And if the Sphinx is a guardian, then perhaps it stands watch over something more than just sand. The notion of hidden tunnels is not just a modern fantasy. Throughout history, whispers of chambers beneath the Sphinx have surfaced in travelers' diaries, in archaeological rumors, in the strange alignment of myths from cultures far apart. In the 20th century, seismic surveys even suggested hollow spaces within the bedrock itself, and yet, the official word has always been the same. There is nothing beneath, nothing to see. It's a curious stance in a world where archaeology thrives on discovery. Why such certainty in the face of mystery? Is it because the truth would be too disruptive to our understanding of history, or because the mystery itself is more valuable left unsolved? When you stand before the Sphinx, the immensity of it feels almost unreal. The weathered face, the eroded body, the pores stretching longer than a city bus. It is both a monument and a survivor. This stone giant has endured wars, floods, earthquakes, vandalism, and centuries buried up to its neck in sand. If there were tunnels beneath, they too would have been buried and unburied, hidden and found, in cycles that stretch beyond living memory. Legends claim that these tunnels might lead to what is known as the Halls of Records, a mythical archive said to preserve the knowledge of a lost civilization, perhaps even one predating Egypt's own rise. Others believe the tunnels were ceremonial routes used by priests to perform sacred rites, hidden from the eyes of common citizens, and some think they were simply part of the Sphinx's construction process, practical spaces for workers, not treasure seekers. But the allure of the unknown is not diminished by practical explanations. In fact, it thrives in the tension between the ordinary and the extraordinary. As we begin this journey together, think of the Sphinx not just as an ancient statue, but as a threshold. Above, the wind and stars; below, the silent dark. What lies there, if anything, is locked behind thousands of years of stone and secrecy. We will walk the line between history and legend, between the archaeologist's measured brush and the storyteller's breath. You will hear of explorers whose notes hinted at the impossible, of scientists who saw patterns that others refused to acknowledge, and of myths that persist despite every effort to dismiss them. And along the way, you may find yourself asking, are we uncovering the truth, or are we following the trail of a much older imagination? The desert at night is a patient companion. It does not answer quickly, The Sphinx too offers no reply to our questions, only its silent watch as the stars drift overhead. Yet in that silence, there is an invitation, a promise that somewhere between fact and legend, we may catch the faint echo of a secret long kept. Tonight we step closer to the stone pause, we let the sands fall quiet behind us, and we begin to listen. Not just to history, but to the space beneath it. The Great Sphinx has been called many things across the centuries: guardian, sentinel, riddle, and ruin. Yet, for all its names, it remains a monument wrapped in uncertainty. To understand the mystery of the tunnels, we must first walk back through time, not just to the Egypt of golden crowns and temple processions, but to the very beginning of its recorded history, when sand and sky met in the shadow of this silent figure. In the official record, the Sphinx is thought to have been carved around 4,500 years ago during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre of the 4th dynasty. Khafre's pyramid rises just behind the Sphinx, a geometric mirror of the celestial order the Egyptians revered. Scholars believe the face of the Sphinx may even bear his likeness, a sculpted proclamation of divine authority and earthly power. But this is where the story begins to fracture. Weathering patterns on the Sphinx's body, deep vertical grooves and rounded erosion marks, have led some researchers to suggest an older origin, perhaps thousands of years before Khafre, in a time when the Giza plateau saw heavy rainfall. Such rains haven't touched this desert in over 7,000 years, placing the Sphinx's possible creation deep into a prehistoric age, for which Egypt has no written record. The Egyptians themselves left almost nothing in their surviving inscriptions about the Sphinx's creation. No grand hieroglyphic panels declaring when it was carved. No temple walls detailing the workers who shaped its form. It stands in contrast to their usual obsession with documenting the divine order of their works. Why was the Sphinx's story left untold? Was it so ancient by Khafre's time that its origins were already a legend? Or was its silence deliberate, its purpose too sacred to be described in public record? Even in antiquity, the Sphinx was shrouded in myth. The Greeks, arriving many centuries later, associated it with their own Sphinx, an enigmatic creature of riddles and death. Arab historians of the Middle Ages believed it hid treasures in its belly, sealed behind secret doors. Some Islamic scholars saw it as a monument built by a vanished people before the Great Flood. These overlapping traditions, Egyptian, Greek, Arab, are like layers of paint on the same canvas, each adding a different shade of meaning to its presence. Physically, the Sphinx is both majestic and strangely fragile. It measures over 73 meters in length and 20 meters in height, carved directly from the limestone bedrock of the plateau. The head rises proudly, crowned by the Nemes headdress of the pharaohs, while the massive paws stretch forward as if in eternal readiness. Yet, erosion has eaten away at its body, and the nose, missing for centuries, is a reminder that even stone can be wounded by time. Despite this wear, the Sphinx has endured events that would have erased lesser monuments. It has been buried in sand for centuries at a time, uncovered and reburied. Its form revealed like a secret the desert cannot decide whether to keep or share. Each excavation has left its mark, not only in the repaired stone blocks along its flanks, but in the stories told by those who dug at its feet. The Giza plateau itself was the stage for Egypt's grandest architectural dreams. The pyramids, aligned with astonishing precision to the stars, served as tombs and cosmic gateways for the pharaohs. Temples flanked the Sphinx, forming a sacred complex that linked the celestial with the earthly. It was here, in the interplay of sun, shadow, and stone, that the Egyptians performed rituals to maintain the balance of Mat, the cosmic order. The Sphinx's placement was not random. It lies directly on the east-west axis of the plateau, facing the rising sun, its gaze locked on the horizon where day is born. In a symbolic sense, it was the dawn's first witness, greeting the rebirth of Rada each morning. If tunnels truly lie beneath it, they would have existed within one of the most sacred points in the ancient Egyptian spiritual landscape. And yet, for all this grandeur, there is an absence, a hole in the historical fabric. No papyrus scrolls describing its construction have survived. No ancient worker's graffiti confirms who shaped its massive paws. Instead, we are left with fragments, later stelae honoring its presence, restoration records from pharaohs who came long after, and myths from ages when its true origin was already slipping into legend. One of the most famous of these records is the dream stele of Pharaoh Thutmose IV, placed between the paws around 1400 BCE. The stele recounts a dream, in which the Sphinx buried in sand, promised the young Thutmose the throne of Egypt if he freed it from its desert prison. Thutmose obeyed, excavating the Sphinx and restoring its form, but the stele is silent about its maker. It does not name Khafre, nor any other builder. Instead, it speaks as though the Sphinx's authority transcends any one dynasty, as if it has always been here. This lack of definitive origin has left the Sphinx open to interpretations, both scholarly and imaginative. Was it carved in a single burst of labor, a grand royal project? Or was it reshaped from an earlier structure, perhaps a lion statue or something stranger, by later dynasties seeking to claim its symbolic power? If its tunnels exist, could they be remnants of this earlier form, passageways into a chapter of history long erased from Egypt's own memory? The historical context, then, is not a firm foundation but a shifting desert, solid in places, soft in others, and always shaped by the winds of interpretation. Archaeologists dig for facts, historians sift through texts, and dreamers chase whispers in the sand. Each is drawn to the same place, the paws of the great Sphinx, where stone and shadow conceal whatever truth remains. The Sphinx's role as the guardian of Giza is undeniable, but what it guards, whether the symbolic horizon of the sun god or the physical entrance to something hidden, remains unproven. This duality is what makes it irresistible. It stands both as a fact of stone and a question carved into the bedrock of history, and it is here, in this balance between known and unknown, that our journey begins to turn toward the whispers of explorers and scholars who claim to see more than just stone, the first hints of hidden chambers, secret doors, and tunnels that slip beneath the paws, rumors born not of modern fantasy, but of accounts written long before our time. The idea that something lies hidden beneath the great Sphinx is not a creation of modern documentaries or internet forums. Long before radar scans and ground-penetrating surveys, the first explorers, travelers, and chroniclers of the Sphinx left behind their own quiet hints, fragments of stories, suggesting that the stone paws might rest upon something more than solid rock. When Napoleon's army marched into Egypt in 1798, his accompanying scholars documented the Sphinx as part of their great survey of the land. At that time, the Sphinx's body was still buried up to its neck in sand, with only the head and a portion of the headdress visible. But even then, locals spoke of passageways and chambers beneath the sand. Some claimed the statue itself was hollow, others that a hidden door could be found somewhere between the paws. These whispers echoed older accounts. In the writings of Arab historians from the 14th and 15th centuries, the Sphinx is sometimes described as guarding a treasure vault or secret storehouse of ancient wisdom. Such descriptions were often dismissed by scholars as medieval fantasy, yet they persisted over centuries, often from people who had never met, never shared their stories, and yet spoke of similar hidden spaces. In the 19th century, as European interest in Egypt's antiquities exploded, early archaeologists and adventurers made attempts to clear the sands around the Sphinx. In 1817, Giovanni Battista Caviglia, an Italian explorer, began one of the first major excavations of the Sphinx in modern times. His work uncovered much of the front portion of the statue, including the paws, and in doing so he reportedly found small fissures and openings in the stone. There is a story, half documented, half rumor, that Caviglia explored a narrow cavity near one paw that descended several meters before ending abruptly. Whether it was a natural fissure, an unfinished chamber, or the remnant of something older is unknown. His own notes are incomplete, and much of his work was interrupted by logistical challenges and shifting sands that buried the Sphinx once again. Later in the 19th century, French engineer Émile Baraisse undertook a more comprehensive excavation between 1925 and 1936. Baraisse's work was officially aimed at restoring the Sphinx and clearing the accumulated sand, but in private letters he wrote cryptically about subterranean works beneath the monument. Some Egyptologists believe he was referring to water channels eroded in the bedrock, but others point out that his team conducted extensive underground masonry work, efforts that according to records went unexplained in official restoration reports. During this period, local workers and on-site assistants spoke of sealed doorways in the stone floor between the Sphinx's paws. Whether these were ancient features or repairs from earlier excavations remains unclear. What is clear is that these rumors were widespread enough to draw the attention of both archaeologists and mystics alike. By the mid-20th century, Egyptology was becoming more formalized, and such tunnel stories were often dismissed as exaggerations. Yet a curious entry in the Egyptian Antiquities Department's archives from the 1940s mentions a subsurface anomaly detected during a survey of the Sphinx's foundation. The language is vague, perhaps intentionally so, and the notation ends without follow-up documentation. It is as if the discovery was noted but never pursued, or never made public. It was around this time that foreign researchers began to arrive with more sensitive instruments, hoping to probe beneath the surface without excavation. In the late 1960s, a Japanese team from Waseda University conducted studies at the Sphinx and reported differences in bedrock density beneath certain areas of the monument, suggesting possible hollow spaces. Their findings were not widely published, and when they were framed as geological curiosities rather than archaeological evidence. Still, the hints were there. Something beneath was different from the solid limestone around it. For the locals, the existence of such spaces was never in doubt. Bedouin guides, many of whom had lived their entire lives near the Giza plateau, passed down stories of hidden doors and blocked passageways. One tale, told by multiple families over generations, described a narrow tunnel that led from the Sphinx toward the Great Pyramid, a hidden link between the Guardian and the tombs of kings. These oral histories, while impossible to verify, were consistent in their imagery: darkness beneath the stone, the smell of ancient air, and the feeling of stepping into a place not meant for all eyes. Even today, if you stand between the Sphinx's massive paws and look closely at the weathered stone, you can see subtle variations in the surface, places where blocks were patched, or where the limestone appears less eroded than the surrounding rock. Egyptologists attribute these to restoration work from various dynasties, but to the curious observer, they could be read as sealed entrances, cleverly disguised to blend with the statue's form. This is the moment where history and imagination begin to blur. The early explorers left enough ambiguity in their accounts to invite questions, and the locals kept alive a tradition of secret knowledge. By the time modern archaeology reached the plateau in force, the seed of the tunnel theory had already taken root. In the 20th century, that seed would sprout into a far more sensational idea, that beneath the Sphinx lies not just a tunnel but an entire hidden chamber of ancient records, a vault containing the history of a forgotten civilization. This belief would be popularized, disputed, and fiercely defended in the years to come. The first reports, whether from explorers' journals, local legends, or strange engineering notes, share a common thread: the suspicion that the Sphinx is not merely a solid monument carved from bedrock, but the stone guardian of something unseen. And these whispers, drifting through centuries of observation and speculation, will lead us straight into the heart of one of the most persistent legends of all time. It is perhaps the most enduring and alluring of all the legends connected to the Great Sphinx. The idea that beneath its massive paws lies a vault of unimaginable knowledge, sealed away since the dawn of human civilization. This is the so-called Hall of Records, a mythical library said to preserve the history, technology, and wisdom of a world that existed long before ancient Egypt rose on the banks of the Nile. The phrase Hall of Records gained fame in the 20th century, but the seeds of the idea are far older. In ancient Egyptian cosmology, sacred texts were often said to be hidden in secret chambers for safekeeping, guarded by priests or by spiritual entities. Temples and pyramids were not just physical structures, they were repositories of cosmic order, designed to endure beyond the span of human lifetimes. The concept of a subterranean archive, beneath the Sphinx, fits naturally into this tradition, whether or not it is literally true. The modern spark for the Hall of Records legend can be traced most directly to the American mystic Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet. In a series of trance readings during the 1920s and 1930s, Cayce claimed that the Sphinx was far older than Egyptian civilization itself. He spoke of an advanced culture, often linked by his followers to the mythical Atlantis, that fled a great cataclysm and brought its knowledge to Egypt. According to Cayce, these survivors stored their wisdom in 3 repositories around the world, one in the Yucatan, one in Atlantis itself, and one beneath the sands near the Sphinx. Cayce was specific. He described the Hall of Records as lying between the paws of the Sphinx, and said it contained written records of the Atlantean civilization's history, maps of the world before the Great Flood, and prophecies of future events. He also suggested the chamber would be discovered in the late 20th century, timing that, as we know, has come and gone without public revelation. For mainstream archaeology, Cayce's claims were easy to dismiss. There is no physical evidence for Atlantis, no historical documents linking the Sphinx to any pre-dynastic culture of such scale, and no ancient Egyptian text that explicitly mentions a hidden chamber of knowledge. And yet, Cayce's words have had a remarkable persistence. Part of this endurance comes from their poetic imagery. The idea of an ancient vault waiting patiently under the desert for thousands of years is as irresistible as it is improbable. But part of it also comes from the curious way Cayce's descriptions seem to align with later discoveries. When seismic studies in the 1990s revealed possible cavities beneath the Sphinx, Cayce's followers saw it as vindication. Even if archaeologists said these voids were natural formations or simple gaps in the limestone, the similarity between prediction and finding was enough to fan the flames of belief. Long before Cayce, however, other traditions had hinted at such a hidden place. Some Arab historians of the medieval period wrote of treasure vaults sealed in stone under the desert's guardians. Ancient Greek writers, interpreting Egyptian religion through their own mythic lens, spoke of underground halls where the priests kept the sacred scrolls. While none of these accounts match Cayce's level of specificity, they share a common theme: the idea that the Sphinx's purpose is not merely symbolic, but custodial. Even the Egyptian word for Sphinx, in certain periods, Shizpank, the living image, could be read in this light. Was it the living image of the sun god Horus, as most Egyptologists believe, or could it be the living guardian of something physically present, alive in memory, if not in breath, beneath the earth? The Hall of Records legend also intersects with broader archaeological mysteries. Across the ancient world, we find instances of sacred knowledge being hidden or buried for safekeeping. Scrolls in the caves of Qumran, the carved codices of the Maya, the sealed burial vaults of China's first emperor. In each case, the preservation of knowledge was both practical and symbolic. Practical because it protected the material from destruction, symbolic because it enacted the belief that truth can outlive its keepers. To those who believe in the Hall of Records, the Sphinx's tunnels are not merely architectural features, but a final safeguard. The chamber's alleged position, beneath the paws, would make it nearly impossible to access without damaging the monument itself. If such a place exists, it would explain why, in the centuries of excavations and restorations, no official announcement has ever been made about its discovery. Skeptics argue that the legend persists precisely because it is unfalsifiable. Without destructive excavation, we cannot prove the absence of such a chamber, and so the myth lives on in the gap between evidence and possibility. They note that ground surveys can reveal cavities, but not their contents, that ancient Egyptian construction techniques, while impressive, did not leave behind a verified precedent for such a massive subterranean archive, and that oral and mystical accounts, while culturally rich, cannot be treated as direct evidence. But belief is a stubborn thing, especially when it is draped in the romance of lost knowledge. For many, the Hall of Records is not just about the physical discovery of scrolls or relics, it's about what such a discovery would mean. It would rewrite our understanding of history, connect disparate ancient myths, and perhaps even shift our sense of humanity's place in time. The possibility alone is enough to shape the way some researchers approach the Sphinx. A handful of independent archaeologists and enthusiasts have spent decades trying to prove the chamber's existence. Some have petitioned the Egyptian authorities for excavation permits, others have sought private funding to conduct their own non-invasive scans. While most such efforts end in bureaucratic dead ends, they leave behind a trail of tantalizing claims, odd seismic readings, photographs of supposed block seams in the bedrock, and testimonies from workers who say they were told to fill in certain openings during restoration. In the quiet hours, when the tourists have gone, and the plateau is still, it is easy to imagine the Hall of Records as real. The night wind might be the breath of an ancient ventilation shaft, the stone paws might press gently on the roof of a hidden library, the weight of millennia keeping its secrets safe. You might imagine walking down a narrow tunnel into a vast torchlit hall, its walls lined with shelves of golden papyrus rolls, its air heavy with the scent of cedar chests and ink older than history itself. Whether this is fantasy or the echo of a real past is the question that keeps the legend alive, and like all great mysteries, it gains its power not from proof but from the inability to close the case entirely. If the Hall of Records is a myth, it is a remarkably enduring one, woven from ancient symbolism, revived by modern mysticism, and reinforced by the unexplained anomalies beneath the Sphinx's stone belly. If it is real, then somewhere under the sands of Giza, sealed in silence, lies a doorway to a chapter of human history we have never read. And in the 1990s, for a brief moment, it seemed we might have been closer than ever to opening that doorway. Next, we step into the years when technology first dared to peer under the pores, the 1990s seismic scans that reignited the tunnel debate and pushed the Hall of Records legend into the spotlight once again. By the dawn of the 1990s, the Sphinx had already been the subject of countless photographs, tourist guides, and scholarly papers. But for all the attention it received above ground, what lay beneath it remained elusive, locked in speculation, oral tradition, and the occasional half-forgotten field note. It was in this decade that science, with its quiet instruments and unblinking sensors, would make its first real attempt to see through the stone and into the earth beneath. In 1991, a joint team from Florida State University, the University of Waseda in Japan, and the Shaw Foundation arrived at the Giza Plateau with a plan. They intended to conduct seismic refraction and ground-penetrating radar (GPR) surveys, scanning both the Sphinx and the surrounding bedrock. These methods, long used in geology and engineering, could detect variations in density, allowing researchers to identify voids, cavities, or structural anomalies without physically disturbing the site. The process was simple in theory, but delicate in execution. Seismic waves were sent into the ground, and sensors recorded the way those waves traveled. In solid rock, the waves moved quickly. In air-filled spaces, they slowed and bounced differently. Patterns emerged on the readouts, patterns that in the hands of trained geophysicists could be translated into a kind of underground map. What the team claimed to find would stir controversy for decades to come. The seismic data suggested the presence of several large rectangular cavities beneath the Sphinx, some directly under its pores, others extending toward its rear and sides. One of the most intriguing anomalies appeared on the eastern side, between the pores, precisely the location where Edgar Cayce had predicted the Hall of Records would be. According to the Shaw Foundation's statements at the time, these cavities were too geometrically regular to be explained by natural erosion alone. They argued that the shapes suggested deliberate construction, chambers cut into the limestone, sealed and buried long before the Sphinx was carved. Not everyone agreed. Officials from the Egyptian Antiquities Organization, led then by Dr. Zahi Hawass, initially acknowledged the anomalies, but quickly downplayed their significance. Hawass, an influential figure in Egyptian archaeology, would later say the voids were either natural fissures or unrelated to any hidden structures. He maintained that there was no credible evidence of chambers beneath the Sphinx connected to Atlantean myths or Hall of Records theories, yet the matter was complicated by the fact that the full survey data was never made widely available to independent researchers. To enthusiasts, this looked like suppression. To skeptics, it was simply a matter of professional control, ensuring that findings were interpreted by qualified experts, not sensationalized by pseudoscience. The public's imagination, however, had already been captured. Media reports in the early 1990s began to weave together the seismic anomalies, Cayce's predictions, and the Sphinx's long history of tunnel rumors into a single irresistible narrative. Articles appeared in magazines and newspapers, suggesting that we were on the brink of discovering a hidden archive of ancient knowledge. Television documentaries dramatized the findings, showing glowing computer models of chambers beneath the pores, slow pans over the Sphinx's enigmatic face, and interviews with researchers hinting at world-changing discoveries. The mystery moved from scholarly journals into living rooms around the world, gaining a new kind of momentum. Behind the scenes, tensions rose. The Shaw Foundation claimed it was denied permission to continue its work. Requests for further excavation or more detailed scans were rejected. Official statements insisted that nothing of significance had been found, while independent voices argued that the data had been selectively interpreted, or worse, intentionally buried. One particularly persistent rumor suggested that a small entrance or tunnel was located just behind the Sphinx's head, leading down toward one of the anomalies detected in the survey. Photographs exist, showing workers entering a narrow shaft in this location during restoration work in the 1990s, but Egyptian authorities stated it was merely for structural inspection, not exploration of hidden chambers. From a scientific standpoint, the surveys had limitations. Seismic and radar methods can identify density changes, but they cannot reveal the nature of those voids. A cavity might be an ancient tomb, or it might be a shallow geological pocket formed millions of years ago. Without excavation, the anomalies remain ambiguous, existing in a liminal space between fact and possibility. But in the context of the Sphinx's mythology, ambiguity is fertile soil. The 1990s surveys gave the tunnel legends something they had never had before: modern data. Even if those data points were open to interpretation, they provided a tangible foothold for believers and skeptics alike to argue their cases. By the mid-1990s, the debate had reached a standstill. The anomalies had been found, acknowledged, and explained away, yet the questions persisted. Why were the survey results not fully published? Why was further investigation resisted? Was it simply a matter of heritage protection, or was there something beneath the Sphinx that the authorities truly did not want the world to see? These questions became the bridge between the romantic myths of the past and the bureaucratic realities of the present. The story of the tunnels was no longer just about ancient Egypt, it was now also about modern secrecy, the politics of archaeology, and the struggle between open inquiry and controlled narrative. The 1990s scans remain, to this day, one of the most tantalizing chapters in the Sphinx's recent history. For those who believe in the Hall of Records, they are the closest we have come to proof. For skeptics, they are a cautionary tale about the human tendency to see patterns where none exist. And for the rest of us, they are simply a reminder that even in the age of high technology, the world can still keep its secrets. And so as the dust of the 1990s settled, the story shifted, not into the earth, but into the realm of politics and preservation. The focus turned toward the role of the Egyptian authorities and the delicate balance between protecting a national treasure and satisfying a global hunger for discovery. The Great Sphinx has stood for thousands of years in open desert, exposed to the winds, the sun, and the shifting sands. And yet, in the modern era, it is protected more carefully than perhaps at any other time in its long history, not from the elements, but from the hands and eyes of those who would dig beneath it. After the 1990s, seismic and radar surveys revealed their anomalies. Public interest in the Sphinx's underworld surged. The idea of hidden chambers became headline material, weaving together archaeology, mysticism, and conspiracy in ways that captivated the global imagination. But as attention grew, so too did the caution of the Egyptian Antiquities Organization, later the Supreme Council of Antiquities. Officially, their stance was rooted in preservation. The Sphinx is not simply an archaeological site, it is a national treasure and an irreplaceable piece of world heritage. Excavations beneath such a structure, they argued, carried significant risk. Disturbing the bedrock could destabilize the monument. Even the act of drilling for further surveys could introduce microfractures into its ancient limestone. From a conservationist's perspective, this caution made sense. The Sphinx has already endured centuries of erosion, restoration, and environmental stress. To introduce new dangers in the pursuit of what might be empty space could seem reckless, yet to those eager for answers, the sudden reluctance to investigate felt like a tightening of control. In the 1990s, requests from foreign teams to excavate or rescan the Sphinx's anomalies were denied or delayed indefinitely. Permits were rare and heavily restricted, with most approvals limited to restoration and surface conservation work. This was not unusual in Egypt, where archaeological access has long been subject to tight oversight. But in the case of the Sphinx, the secrecy surrounding the survey results made the refusals feel deliberate, fueling speculation that the authorities were not just protecting the monument, but withholding information about what lay beneath. Dr. Zahi Hawass, the charismatic and sometimes controversial head of Egypt's antiquities at the time, was a central figure in this debate. Publicly, he dismissed the more sensational interpretations of the seismic data. He was often quoted saying that there was nothing of archaeological significance under the Sphinx and that any cavities detected were natural features in the limestone bedrock. Privately, however, there were hints that he took the anomalies seriously. Interviews and reports from the period suggest that Hawass authorized limited inspections of certain fissures and shafts near the Sphinx. Photographs from restoration projects in the 1990s show workers entering narrow openings in the bedrock. Images that once circulated became fodder for those convinced something was being hidden. The silence was not just about archaeology, it was also about politics and ownership of history. The Sphinx is more than stone, it is a symbol of Egyptian identity and a cornerstone of the tourism industry. Any discovery beneath it, especially one that might shift the established timeline of Egyptian civilization, could have unpredictable effects on the nation's cultural narrative. There was also the matter of foreign influence. In the past, Egypt had seen too many of its treasures removed to museums overseas. Controlling access to the Sphinx was a way of ensuring that if something extraordinary were found, it would remain in Egyptian hands. From the outside, however, the effect of this control was to deepen the mystery. Every denied permit, every sealed-off area, every vague statement became part of the story. The less that was said, the more space there was for imagination to fill the silence. And so, as the 1990s faded into the early 2000s, the narrative of the Sphinx's tunnels shifted. It was no longer just about whether they existed, it was about why the world was not being allowed to see them. To understand why this silence is so powerful, we must step back from the Sphinx itself and consider the larger stage it stands upon. For the Great Sphinx is not an isolated marvel, it is part of a vast and ancient complex, a plateau honeycombed with known and unknown structures. If tunnels lie beneath the Sphinx, they may be only one piece of a much larger network. The Great Sphinx is often shown in photographs, as if it stands alone, its colossal body framed by endless desert. But this image is an illusion. In truth, the Sphinx is part of a much larger stage, a masterpiece of ancient engineering that spans the entire Giza plateau. This plateau is not simply a collection of monuments sitting on solid ground. It is a landscape riddled with passageways, shafts, and chambers, some well documented, others still half forgotten, and a few whose very existence remains debated. To understand the plausibility of tunnels beneath the Sphinx, we must first understand the subterranean world it inhabits. A city beneath the sand. Archaeologists have long known that the Giza plateau is layered, stone above, human-made spaces below. Around the pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, numerous shafts descend deep into the bedrock, some leading to burial chambers, others to storage rooms or ceremonial spaces. In several cases, these shafts connect horizontally, forming networks that stretch hundreds of feet beneath the surface. Near the Great Pyramid itself lies the so-called trial passages, a set of carved corridors whose purpose remains mysterious, practice cuts for pyramid builders, or perhaps unfinished ceremonial routes. South of the Sphinx, the Valley Temple and the Sphinx Temple both contain enormous limestone blocks, some weighing more than 100 tons, fitted with precision that has defied erosion for millennia. Beneath these temples, smaller chambers and drainage systems hint at a more complex underground architecture than is visible on the surface. Water and the underworld. In ancient Egyptian belief, the underground was not merely physical, it was symbolic. The Duat, or underworld, was the realm through which the soul traveled after death. Temples and tombs often mirrored this concept by incorporating subterranean spaces meant to represent the journey below. The Giza plateau itself may have once been subject to seasonal flooding from the Nile. Geological surveys suggest that underground water channels once threaded through the limestone, carving natural voids. The ancient Egyptians could have adapted these channels into functional tunnels, as they did in other sites across the Nile Valley. If so, the Sphinx could easily sit atop, or even incorporate, such modified spaces. Proven examples elsewhere. The idea of hidden passages beneath sacred monuments is not unique to Giza. At Saqqara, the step pyramid of Djoser hides a vast network of tunnels and chambers, over 5 kilometers of corridors winding beneath the structure, carved with exquisite care. At Abydos, deep shaft tombs lead to underground temples, and at Luxor, the Karnak temple complex contains subterranean storehouses and crypts for sacred statues and ritual objects. These examples prove that the ancient Egyptians were not only capable of constructing large-scale underground systems, but that they often placed them beneath their most sacred structures. From this perspective, a tunnel or chamber beneath the Sphinx is not only possible, it fits within a known architectural tradition. Clues on the Sphinx's doorstep. Directly beside the Sphinx, 2 temples, the Valley Temple and the Sphinx Temple, offer subtle hints that their original builders understood and perhaps utilized the underground. The layout of these temples aligns with the Sphinx's body and pores in ways that suggest integrated planning. Their foundations rest on cut limestone bedrock, some blocks sitting atop filled voids that could conceal earlier features. In certain restoration phases, workers noted unusually deep cuttings in the floor stones, as if shafts once descended below, but had been sealed. These cuttings were never fully explored in modern times, due either to safety concerns or official restrictions. Yet their presence raises a tantalizing question: could these sealed verticals connect to horizontal passages beneath the Sphinx itself? The lost shaft, one of the most persistent local legends, speaks of a deep shaft somewhere on the plateau that connects to a long horizontal tunnel running toward the Sphinx. Variations of this story have been told by Bedouin guides for generations. In some versions, the shaft was discovered by accident when a camel's leg broke through the sand. In others, it was a deliberate excavation by treasure seekers who were eventually forced to abandon their work. The location of this shaft, if it exists, is not public knowledge. Some claim it lies north of the Sphinx, others say directly beneath its tail. In every telling, it serves as a reminder that the Giza plateau may hold far more beneath its surface than is currently mapped. Modern surveys beyond the Sphinx geophysical studies in the late 20th and early 21st centuries have revealed that anomalies are not confined to the Sphinx itself. Several radar and seismic scans have detected irregularities in the bedrock across the plateau, including voids and potential passageways near the Sphinx temple. Some of these anomalies appear in straight lines, a pattern more consistent with human construction than with natural geology. In one particularly intriguing survey, a void was detected running parallel to the Sphinx's body, extending toward the Khafre causeway. This alignment would have made sense in ceremonial terms, linking the guardian statue to the pyramid complex it watches over. A guardian within a network. If the Sphinx's tunnels exist, they may be less of a secret, standalone vault, and more of a node in a much larger network, a network that served both practical and symbolic functions. Such a system could have moved water, stored sacred objects, and facilitated ritual processions hidden from public view. In the mind of the ancient Egyptian priesthood, these underground routes may have been as spiritually important as the temples above. The modern challenge is that many parts of this network, if it exists, are inaccessible. Some areas are covered by modern pathways and tourist infrastructure, others lie under heavy blocks or have been sealed with concrete during past restorations. Every year, as the sands shift, new fragments are revealed and quickly cordoned off, each one adding to the sense of a great hidden map beneath Giza's surface. From the surface, the Sphinx appears solitary and self-contained, but to those who have studied the plateau closely, it is more like the keystone in a vast unseen structure, its body perhaps connected to the underworld by ways carved thousands of years ago. And in the shadow of such possibilities, the local legends take on new weight. For the people who live within sight of the Sphinx, these tunnels are not an abstract theory. They are part of the plateau's living memory, passed down through stories told at dusk, when the desert grows quiet and the stars begin to pierce the darkness. When the tourist buses leave and the plateau falls into silence, the Sphinx returns to the care of the people who live in its shadow. For the locals, it is not just a monument for postcards and guidebooks, it is part of the landscape of their lives. They see it at sunrise, when the air is still cool and the light paints its face gold. They see it at night, when the moon rests on its brow, and they speak of it in ways that are different from the language of archaeologists. Here, the tunnels beneath the Sphinx are not a theory to be proven or disproven. They are a given part of the inherited memory of the place, woven into the stories told by parents to children, and by elders to anyone willing to listen. The old men by the tea house, near the edge of the modern village that borders the plateau. There is a small tea house where older men gather in the late afternoons. Their stories about the Sphinx begin softly, with the kind of casual certainty that makes it seem absurd to doubt them. One man might speak of a time decades ago when he worked on a restoration crew and saw a narrow opening near the Sphinx's flank, just wide enough for a man to slip through. He says it led to a passage sloping down into the bedrock, the air inside cool and stale, before a blocked doorway stopped him from going farther. He shrugs when asked what was behind it. Some things, he says, are not meant to be disturbed. Another tells of his grandfather, who claimed that in his youth he had followed a tunnel from a well near the mosque all the way to a stone chamber beneath the pause. The chamber, he said, was empty, save for carvings on the walls that glimmered in the light of his lantern. His grandfather never went back, not because he couldn't, but because he felt as though he had stepped into a place that was not for the living. The camel driver's story, the plateau's camel drivers, who spend long hours guiding visitors between the pyramids and the Sphinx, often claim to know the land better than anyone. One, in particular, a man with sun-worn skin and a quiet voice, tells a story that has been passed down in his family for 3 generations. He says there is a stone slab somewhere at the base of the Sphinx that, when struck in just the right place, echoes differently from the surrounding rock. His great-grandfather believed it was the roof of a hollow space. This slab, according to the story, was once part of a ritual path covered over in ancient times to hide what lay below. The man admits he has never seen it uncovered himself, but insists that the echo is still there, waiting for someone to listen closely enough. The keeper's caution: there is also the voice of caution in these tales. A retired site guard, who once patrolled the plateau after hours, warns that the tunnels are not just architectural curiosities, they are dangerous. He recalls a night when he heard strange sounds, like stones shifting, coming from the darkness near the Sphinx's tail. Investigating, he found nothing, but he swears the sand there was freshly disturbed. His view is that the tunnels, if they exist, should remain closed. The Sphinx has kept its secrets for thousands of years, he says. It will keep them until it chooses to share them. To him, the tunnels are not just hidden spaces, they are part of a living mystery that commands respect, patterns in the legends. Though the details change from one storyteller to another, certain themes appear again and again. The tunnels are almost always described as narrow, often sloping downward, and ending in chambers carved from the bedrock. These chambers are sometimes empty, sometimes filled with inscriptions or strange artifacts, and often sealed by ancient stonework that has resisted all attempts to move it. Some say the tunnels connect to the Great Pyramid, forming a secret path for priests or royalty. Others believe they lead to underground lakes or hidden caches of treasure placed there in times of war. A few suggest they are older than Egypt itself, remnants of a civilization lost to the sands of deep time. Why the stories endure? What makes these oral histories so persistent is that they are not tied to archaeological reports or scientific data, they are tied to identity. For the families who have lived here for generations, the Sphinx is part of their heritage, and the tunnels are part of the Sphinx. The stories are told not to prove anything, but to keep alive a connection to a past that is both personal and vast. For visitors, these accounts can sound like folklore, colorful, mysterious, and unverified. But for those who live in the shadow of the Sphinx, the difference between folklore and history is not so rigid. In a place where the past literally lies beneath your feet, it is easy to accept that not all truths are found in official records. As we step away from these quiet conversations, the plateau feels different. The Sphinx no longer seems like an isolated monument, it feels like the visible tip of something much larger, something that the land itself is conspiring to keep hidden. And just as these stories weave memory into stone, there is another thread to the mystery, the idea that the Sphinx's form is not merely symbolic on the surface, but aligned with patterns in the sky, that its body and any tunnels beneath it may be part of a grander celestial design. To the ancient Egyptians, the earth and sky were not separate realms. They were mirrors of one another. Every monument, every temple axis, every sacred enclosure was placed with intention, reflecting celestial patterns that carried both religious meaning and practical purpose. In this worldview, the Great Sphinx was not merely a sculpture carved into limestone, it was part of a cosmic diagram, a point on a map drawn in both sand and starlight. If we hope to understand why there might be tunnels beneath it, and what they could have been for, we must first look upward. Facing the rising sun, the most obvious and perhaps most significant alignment of the Sphinx is its gaze due east, directly toward the rising sun on the spring and autumn equinoxes. On those mornings, the first rays of sunlight strike its face head-on, as though awakening it from its long vigil. In Egyptian symbolism, the east was the direction of life, rebirth, and renewal. The sun god Re traveled across the sky each day, dying in the west, and being reborn in the east. For the Sphinx to face the sunrise was to stand as the eternal witness to this daily resurrection, a role befitting a guardian, and one that connects its physical form to the broader spiritual cycle of the cosmos. If tunnels exist beneath the Sphinx, their placement could be tied to this solar alignment. In Egyptian temple design, underground chambers often mirrored the function of the temple above, serving as storage for sacred objects, or as symbolic gateways to the underworld. A chamber aligned with the Sphinx's gaze might have been conceived as a space where earth and sky meet, a point of cosmic convergence. The Orion connection. The pyramids of Giza are famously aligned with the three stars of Orion's belt, a constellation associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Scholars and archaeoastronomers have long debated whether the Sphinx too fits into this celestial plan. Some researchers propose that the Sphinx's leonine body represents the constellation Leo, and that its positioning relative to the pyramids was designed to reflect the sky as it appeared in a specific ancient epoch. According to this theory, the layout of Giza is a map of the heavens, a snapshot of the stars frozen in stone. If so, the tunnels beneath the Sphinx could be part of this map. In ancient Egyptian thought, the underworld was as much a part of the cosmic order as the visible stars. An underground chamber could represent the Duat, a celestial realm below the horizon, and might have been designed to align with specific stars or constellations as they dipped beneath the earth. The precessional puzzle, one of the more controversial ideas in Sphinx studies, involves the astronomical concept of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the positions of the stars over thousands of years. Proponents of the Orion-Leo theory argue that the Sphinx's alignment corresponds to the constellation Leo, as it would have appeared around 10,500 BCE, during the so-called Age of Leo. This date is far earlier than the conventional timeline for ancient Egypt and would suggest that the Sphinx, or at least its original form, predates dynastic civilization. If true, it would also imply that any tunnels beneath it could be even older, perhaps relics of a lost culture whose astronomical knowledge was far ahead of its time. While mainstream Egyptology rejects such an early date, the astronomical precision of Giza's monuments is undisputed. Whether built in 2500 BCE or 10,500 BCE, the Sphinx's position is no accident, and if the builders went to such lengths to align its gaze with the sun and its form with the stars, it is not unreasonable to think that they may have also designed hidden spaces in accordance with those same principles. Sacred geometry and hidden space. The Egyptians were masters of sacred geometry, embedding symbolic proportions in their architecture. In some temples, measurements correspond to celestial cycles, the length of a hall matching the number of days in a lunar month, for example. Applied to the Sphinx, this raises an intriguing possibility. The dimensions and placement of any subterranean chambers might mirror astronomical cycles. A tunnel could lead to a chamber shaped or proportioned according to a star's path, or aligned so that on a particular day of the year, sunlight or starlight could penetrate deep underground. While no such direct evidence has been found beneath the Sphinx, similar effects have been documented elsewhere in Egypt. In the Temple of Amun at Karnak, shafts and corridors are aligned to the solstices, allowing light to travel through the temple's dark interior at specific moments. Could the Sphinx conceal a smaller-scale version of this phenomenon beneath its pores? The sky as a ritual calendar. For ancient priests, the stars were not just points of light, they were markers in a sacred calendar. Certain rituals could only be performed when specific stars rose or set. A hidden chamber beneath the Sphinx could have served as a ritual space-time to these celestial events, a place where initiates gathered in darkness to await the moment when a shaft of light or a symbolic alignment signaled the opening of the ceremony. This concept would tie the Sphinx's underground world directly to its role as a liminal figure, part lion, part human, part earth, part sky. Above it gazed toward the sunrise, below it could guard the threshold to a cosmic passage, the stargazer's legacy. Whether or not such alignments were intentionally linked to tunnels beneath the Sphinx, they add another layer of plausibility to the legend. The ancient Egyptians thought in cosmic terms, weaving the heavens into their most sacred structures. To them, building a hidden space beneath the guardian of the East, tied to the path of the sun or the constellations, would not have been eccentric, it would have been the natural extension of their worldview. As night deepens on the plateau, the stars emerge above the Sphinx's head. The Orion climbs the eastern horizon, and Leo arches along the curve of the sky. The air cools, the desert falls still, and for a moment it feels as though the great statue is not just watching the heavens, but conversing with them. If there are tunnels beneath it, perhaps they too are part of that conversation, silent now, but once aligned with a language of light and shadow, earth and sky, time and eternity. The Great Sphinx is not the only ancient monument said to guard secrets beneath its feet. Across the world, in places separated by oceans and millennia, sacred structures share a curious commonality. What lies below is as important, sometimes more so, than what rises above. When we look at these sites together, a pattern emerges. Civilizations across time and geography seem to have understood that the earth beneath a sacred place is part of its sanctity. Sometimes these subterranean spaces served practical purposes: burial, storage, protection from invaders. Other times, they were ceremonial, hidden from the uninitiated, places of initiation or communion with the gods. And occasionally, they seem to be repositories of something greater, memory itself. Teotihuacan, Mexico's underground tunnel. In the ancient city of Teotihuacan, near modern-day Mexico City, archaeologists discovered a sealed tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. The passage extends for over 100 meters, ending in chambers lined with pyrite fool's gold that would have glittered in torchlight, like a starry sky. The tunnel appears to have been intentionally filled and hidden away, its existence forgotten for centuries. Like the alleged Sphinx tunnels, it lay silent until modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, revealed its presence. Its function remains uncertain, a symbolic journey to the underworld, a ceremonial storehouse, or something else entirely. Angkor Wat, Cambodia's hidden causeways, half a world away, the sprawling temple complex of Angkor Wat in Cambodia hides more than its ornate towers suggest. Recent LiDAR surveys have revealed previously unknown causeways and hidden structures beneath its grounds. Some align precisely with astronomical events, suggesting that the unseen spaces were designed with as much cosmic intention as the temples above. Though different in form from Egypt's stone-cut tunnels, these subterranean features share the Sphinx's air of deliberate concealment. They are part of the temple's sacred geography, invisible to the casual visitor, yet essential to its design. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey's buried sanctuary. In southeastern Turkey, the site of Göbekli Tepe has been called the world's first temple, built around 11,000 years ago, long before writing or agriculture. While the structures themselves are not underground, the entire complex was intentionally buried under tons of soil in antiquity. Beneath its layers, archaeologists have found carved pillars and enclosures whose purpose is still debated. The act of burying something sacred is in itself a kind of tunneling, not downward into the bedrock, but inward into secrecy. If the Sphinx's builders hid something below it, they would be participating in a tradition far older and broader than Egypt alone. China's first emperor, the sealed tomb of Qin Shi Huang in Xi'an, China, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, remains unexcavated. While the famous terracotta army stands guard outside, the burial chamber itself lies beneath a massive earthen mound. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury flowing within a symbolic recreation of the empire. Chinese authorities have left the chamber unopened, citing preservation concerns, a decision that echoes Egypt's caution with the Sphinx. Both sites sit atop potential treasures of knowledge, both are guarded by layers of cultural meaning, and both have become the subject of speculation precisely because they remain sealed. A global pattern from Central America to Southeast Asia, from prehistoric Anatolia to imperial China. The message is clear: what is hidden beneath sacred structures often carries as much importance as what is visible above. The Great Sphinx, if it indeed has tunnels or chambers beneath it, would not be an anomaly in human history, it would be part of a widespread and enduring pattern. Ancient peoples everywhere seem to understand that the earth beneath their most sacred monuments was not just foundation, but a continuation of the monument itself. Why the parallels matter drawing these comparisons does not prove the existence of tunnels beneath the Sphinx, but it reframes the question. The idea is not outlandish, it is entirely consistent with what we know of ancient architectural and spiritual traditions. If the builders of Teotihuacan, Angkor Göbekli Tepe, and Chin's tomb created hidden spaces beneath their monuments, why would the master planners of the Giza plateau have done any less? And if those spaces remain sealed today, what might they contain, not just in material terms, but in the intangible sense of cultural and cosmic meaning? By placing the Sphinx within this global pattern, we begin to see it less as an isolated marvel and more as part of a shared human instinct to guard our deepest truths in places where only time itself can reach them. And yet, for all these parallels, there is one crucial difference. While some ancient subterranean spaces have been opened and studied, the ground beneath the Sphinx remains untouched in living memory, which brings us back to the present, and to the quiet restrictions that keep its secrets in place. The Great Sphinx has stood under open skies for thousands of years. Yet in the modern era, it is more guarded than at any point in its history. Tourists can walk the paths that circle its base, but their distance is carefully controlled. Archaeologists can study its weathered surface, but their access beneath the monument is tightly limited. And as for the spaces that may lie within or below it, those are, for now, beyond the reach of all but a select few. The layers of control. The Sphinx sits within a fenced, ticketed zone, managed by Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. Entry is timed, movement is channeled, and the closest approach to the monument is regulated by security personnel. These measures serve an obvious purpose: to protect a fragile ancient monument from the wear of millions of footsteps and the touch of curious hands. But beyond the public perimeter, there are deeper layers of restriction. Certain areas, particularly those behind the Sphinx and around its paws, are accessible only to authorized personnel. Any excavation or even ground-penetrating survey requires multiple levels of government approval, often with review by senior antiquities officials. Restoration versus exploration in the modern era. Most work conducted around the Sphinx has been classified as restoration, not exploration. Teams repair the eroded limestone, replace damaged blocks, and stabilize the base against shifting sand and water infiltration. These efforts are necessary. Without them, the Sphinx would crumble under the slow but relentless forces of nature. Yet these restoration projects sometimes involve activities that to an outsider look very much like exploration. Photographs exist of workers lowering themselves into narrow shafts or clearing debris from depressions in the bedrock. Official statements describe these actions as part of structural inspections, but they inevitably stir speculation. Could such work also provide opportunities to investigate suspected tunnels? And if so, are the results ever made public? The authority of the gatekeepers. For decades, one of the most influential figures in this system was Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former Minister of Antiquities. Known for his flamboyant public persona and his fierce defense of Egypt's heritage, Hawass has consistently dismissed sensational claims about the Sphinx's underworld. He has described the anomalies found in seismic surveys as natural fissures, and he has firmly rejected theories of Atlantean archives or pre-dynastic construction. Still, his tenure coincided with some of the most tantalizing modern imagery of restricted areas, photographs of sealed doors, partially excavated shafts, and workmen disappearing into narrow gaps at the Sphinx's base. Hawass has insisted these images are taken out of context, but to those already convinced that secrets lie below, they appear as evidence of something being deliberately hidden. The preservation argument, the official position of Egypt's antiquities authorities, is straightforward. Excavation beneath the Sphinx is too risky. Any disturbance to the bedrock could undermine the monument's structural integrity. Even drilling for non-invasive surveys, they argue, could cause microfractures that spread through the ancient limestone. There is merit to this concern. The Sphinx has already endured extensive erosion and repair. The loss of a single supporting stratum could have irreversible consequences. In this view, the potential rewards of exploration simply do not outweigh the risks. The shadow of speculation, yet restriction breeds speculation. When information is scarce and access is denied, stories multiply to fill the silence. Some believe the government fears a discovery that would rewrite Egyptian history. Others suspect international politics, concerns over ownership, custody, and the potential exploitation of artifacts. In the absence of official transparency, even small actions take on oversized meaning. A blocked-off area becomes a sign of a hidden entrance. A restoration scaffold becomes a potential cover for secret excavation. The mystery feeds on the very secrecy meant to protect the site, a monument between two worlds. The Sphinx thus occupies a unique space, open to the gaze of the world, yet closed to its hands. It exists in the public imagination as both a familiar icon and a forbidden place. For visitors standing at the fence, the knowledge that they cannot step closer and that no one can step below creates a quiet tension, a sense that the most interesting part of the story is just out of reach. The stillness that holds the key. Perhaps the most fitting aspect of this silence is that it mirrors the Sphinx's own demeanor. For thousands of years, it has watched without speaking, kept its vigil without yielding its secrets. In a way, the modern restrictions are an extension of that ancient posture. The tunnels, if they exist, are still guarded, not just by stone, but by policy, politics, and the patience of time. And so, for now, the Sphinx's underworld remains where it has always been, in the realm of possibility, suspended between legend and proof. If we imagine that tunnels truly exist beneath the Great Sphinx, it is tempting to picture them only in practical terms. Stone corridors leading to storage rooms, burial chambers, or hidden archives. But in the mindset of the ancient Egyptians, these spaces would have been more than just physical constructs. They would have been woven into the fabric of religious symbolism, connected to the eternal cycles of life, death, and rebirth. To understand what these tunnels might have meant, we must think not as modern archaeologists, but as ancient priests. The Sphinx as a liminal being. The Sphinx is itself a creature of duality, part human, part lion, rooted in the earth, yet gazing toward the heavens. It stands at the threshold between worlds, the world of the living and the realm of the gods. In Egyptian cosmology, thresholds were sacred spaces, points of transformation, where ordinary reality gave way to the divine. If the Sphinx is a guardian, then its tunnels could be thresholds of their own passages, not just through stone, but into symbolic realms. The descent into the earth would have mirrored the soul's journey into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, where trials and revelations awaited the dead before they could be reborn into eternal life. The underworld path. In the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, the soul's voyage through the Duat is described as a series of gates, each guarded by a deity or a spirit. The initiate, or in mythic terms, the deceased, had to know the names of these guardians, the correct prayers, and the symbolic keys to pass safely. A tunnel beneath the Sphinx could have been a physical echo of this spiritual journey. Each chamber might represent a stage in the underworld passage, a place where rituals were performed to prepare the living for death or to honor the dead in their eternal transformation. The darkness itself would be part of the rite, an immersion in mystery before emerging into the light of rebirth. The keeper of wisdom Egyptian temples often contained hidden rooms, accessible only to the highest-ranking priests, where sacred texts and ritual objects were stored. These were not libraries in the modern sense, but repositories of cosmic order, carefully guarded, because their misuse could, in the eyes of the faithful, disturb the balance of the universe. If the Sphinx's tunnels held such a repository, it would have been natural to cast the Sphinx itself as the keeper of wisdom. In this role, the statue would not merely represent power or vigilance, it would serve as the eternal guardian of the most precious possession of all knowledge. Whether that knowledge was inscribed on papyrus, etched into stone, or passed down orally in rituals performed in the hidden chambers, its secrecy would have been as important as its content. The lion and the horizon in Egyptian symbolism. The lion was often associated with the horizon, the liminal line where day meets night. The Sphinx's leonine body could thus be seen as an embodiment of that meeting point, guarding both the physical horizon to the east and the metaphorical horizon between life and death. Beneath this guardian, the tunnels could have represented the sun's nightly journey beneath the earth, from its death in the west to its rebirth in the east. To pass through them might have been to participate in the same cosmic cycle, enacting in ritual what the sun performed in the heavens each day. Protection through secrecy. Ancient Egyptians believed that powerful knowledge, whether religious, astronomical, or medical, had to be protected from those who were not prepared to receive it. Secrecy was a form of preservation. If the tunnels beneath the Sphinx contained sacred knowledge, sealing them away would not have been an act of loss, but an act of safeguarding. The Sphinx's immense weight and enduring presence would make it the perfect seal, a living lock that could not be moved without great effort. Echoes in other traditions. The idea of guardianship over hidden wisdom is not unique to Egypt. In Greek myth, the Sphinx posed riddles that only the wise could answer. In Jewish tradition, the Ark of the Covenant was kept behind veils, accessible only to the high priest. In Hindu temples, the innermost sanctum, where the deity's presence was most concentrated, was reached only by passing through layers of increasingly restricted space. The Sphinx's tunnels, if they exist, may have served a similar function, the narrowing and deepening of space as a means of focusing the spirit, moving from the wide-open world into a point of ultimate concentration and contact with the divine. A guardian for all time. Seen in this light, the tunnels are not just an archaeological curiosity, they are part of the Sphinx's identity. To uncover them would not simply be to open a door in the rock, it would be to alter the balance of a spiritual design that has endured for millennia. Perhaps this is why, even in modern times, access is so tightly controlled. Perhaps the impulse to protect what lies below is not only political or practical, but also an unconscious continuation of an ancient mandate that the guardian must guard. The conventional history of the Great Sphinx places its construction in the mid-3rd millennium BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. This timeline is supported by stylistic comparisons, proximity to Khafre's pyramid, and some archaeological evidence. Yet, for over a century, a parallel narrative has persisted, one that stretches the Sphinx's origin far deeper into the past, into a time when Egypt itself did not yet exist. This alternative view proposes that the Sphinx is a relic of a lost civilization, possibly one remembered in myths as Atlantis, or one erased from human memory by the slow erasure of time. In this telling, the tunnels beneath the Sphinx are not later additions or storage spaces, they are the original heart of the monument, the reason for its existence. The weathering debate, one of the most cited arguments for an older Sphinx, comes from geology rather than archaeology. In the early 1990s, geologist Dr. Robert Schuck examined the erosion patterns on the Sphinx's body and enclosure walls. He concluded that the deep vertical grooves and rounded contours were consistent with prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall, not wind and sand erosion, which create sharper, more angular patterns. Egypt has not experienced such sustained rainfall since the end of the last ice age, around 7,000, 9,000 years ago. If Schuck's analysis is correct, the Sphinx, or at least its core body, would have to predate dynastic Egypt by thousands of years. This would mean the monument was already ancient when Khafre's pyramid was built, and the tunnels beneath it could belong to an entirely different cultural and historical context. Critics argue that this erosion could be explained by other factors, such as occasional flooding from the Nile or differences in limestone quality, but the debate remains unresolved. The recarving theory, some proponents of an older Sphinx suggest that its head was recarved from an earlier form, perhaps a lion or another symbolic figure, after the original builders were long gone. If the original was a lion, the proportionally small head we see today could be the result of reshaping during Khafre's time to match the pharaoh's likeness. If this is true, the tunnels beneath the Sphinx could be remnants of the earlier structure, passageways cut by a culture whose identity is now lost, only to be inherited and repurposed by the Egyptians we know from history. Atlantis and the Hall of Records, the most famous of these lost civilization theories, ties the Sphinx to the myth of Atlantis. Popularized in the 20th century by Edgar Cayce, the idea suggests that Atlantean survivors fled a cataclysm around 10,500 BCE and brought their knowledge to Egypt. According to Cayce, they built the Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx to safeguard their history and technology for a future age. While mainstream scholars dismiss Atlantis as myth, the allure of this narrative lies in its ability to connect disparate mysteries, ancient flood myths, unexplained alignments, and the sudden appearance of advanced architecture in early civilizations. If one accepts the possibility of such a culture, then the Sphinx becomes not just an Egyptian monument, but a world treasure, the last sentinel of a global past. A global web of ancient sites, supporters of the lost civilization hypothesis, point to similarities between the Sphinx and other megalithic sites worldwide: massive stone blocks, precise alignments, and unexplained engineering feats. They argue that these patterns hint at shared knowledge or a common origin, even if separated by continents. In this view, the tunnels beneath the Sphinx could be part of a network of time capsules scattered across the globe, structures built to survive natural disasters and preserve essential knowledge until humanity was ready to reclaim it. The 10,500 BCE alignment, one of the more mathematically intriguing pieces of evidence cited by proponents, is the supposed alignment of Giza's monuments with the sky as it would have appeared around 10,500 BCE, during the age of Leo. At that time, the constellation Leo would have risen directly in front of the Sphinx at dawn on the spring equinox, with Orion's belt aligned with the three pyramids. If intentional, this alignment could suggest that the Sphinx was placed to mark a specific moment in time, a cosmic signature from the builders. The tunnels beneath could have been intended to preserve records explaining this celestial message. Skepticism and the archaeological counterpoint. Mainstream Egyptologists maintain that there is no direct evidence for any civilization in Egypt before about 5000 BCE, much less one capable of building the Sphinx. They argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that so far, all dating methods and contextual clues point to the 4th dynasty. They also note that tunnels and cavities in limestone are not unusual and can occur naturally. Without artifacts, inscriptions, or unambiguous architectural features, the anomalies beneath the Sphinx remain speculative. Still, even some cautious scholars admit that Egypt's prehistory is far from fully understood. Archaeological work in the Sahara has revealed ancient settlements, rock art, and stone structures dating back thousands of years before dynastic Egypt, suggesting that human presence in the region was more complex than previously thought. Why these theories persist: the endurance of the lost civilization narrative has less to do with concrete evidence and more to do with its emotional and imaginative appeal. It invites us to see ourselves as part of a much longer human story, one that stretches beyond the boundaries of recorded history. It offers the tantalizing hope that somewhere beneath the Sphinx there might be proof of a forgotten chapter, a chapter that could change our understanding of who we are and where we came from. It also benefits from the perfect conditions for mystery: a monument that is both iconic and enigmatic, an official reluctance to excavate, and the occasional scientific anomaly that refuses to fit neatly into the accepted timeline. A monument out of time, Whether the Sphinx is 4,500 years old, or 12,000, whether its tunnels are ceremonial chambers, or the vaults of a lost civilization, it stands as a bridge across time. It connects us to a world that saw the sky and the earth as one canvas, where stone was shaped not just for utility, but for meaning. In the quiet hours before dawn, the idea of the Sphinx as a relic of an earlier age feels almost natural. Its weathered body seems too ancient to belong entirely to the world of the pyramids. Its gaze seems fixed on something older than the rising sun, a memory perhaps of a time when the stars and the earth spoke in a language now forgotten. And yet, for all the speculation, one truth remains: we do not know. And in that not knowing lies the Sphinx's power. Its silence leaves room for imagination, for the possibility that beneath its pores is not just stone, but a doorway to a time beyond time. The Great Sphinx has been measured, photographed, scanned and restored countless times. Its every contour has been traced by archaeologists, its weathering studied by geologists, its alignments mapped by astronomers. And yet, for all this attention, some questions remain as silent and immovable as the statue itself. If there are tunnels beneath the Sphinx, who built them? Were they cut by the same hands that shaped its colossal body, or by an earlier people whose name we no longer know? Were they intended for ceremony, for storage, for burial, or for something we cannot even imagine? Absence as evidence. One of the strangest aspects of the Sphinx mystery is not what has been found, but what has not. Despite centuries of excavation around the Giza plateau, there are no ancient inscriptions explaining the Sphinx's purpose, no blueprint for its construction, no definitive record of what, if anything, was placed beneath it. In ancient Egypt, where monuments often proclaimed their meaning in hieroglyphs and reliefs, this absence feels deliberate. Was the silence meant to protect a secret, or has time simply erased the records that once existed? The data that leads nowhere. Modern technology has added new layers to the puzzle. Seismic surveys, radar scans, and geological studies have all detected anomalies, voids, cavities, changes in bedrock density. Yet none of these can tell us what lies within. Without excavation, they are little more than shadows in the stone, shapes without substance. This creates a peculiar tension. We have just enough data to suggest that something might be there, but not enough to say what it is. And in that space between suggestion and certainty, mystery thrives. The politics of discovery. Even if the existence of tunnels were confirmed, would we be allowed to explore them? Egypt's antiquities authorities maintain that any excavation beneath the Sphinx would be too dangerous. Preservation is the priority, they say, and with good reason. A collapse beneath the monument could cause irreparable damage to one of the most iconic structures in the world. But some believe that politics also plays a role, that the contents of such tunnels, if extraordinary, could challenge established narratives or provoke international disputes over cultural heritage. In this view, the decision to leave the tunnels unexplored is as much about control as conservation. The temptation of certainty. The unanswered questions invite two opposite temptations: to believe too much or to believe too little. For some, the lack of proof is itself proof that the tunnels contain something too important to reveal. For others, the lack of evidence is enough to dismiss the entire idea as fantasy. But the truth may lie somewhere in between. The tunnels could exist, and yet hold nothing more than air and stone. They could be natural formations, misinterpreted anomalies, or abandoned construction from a project never completed. Or they could be exactly what the legends say they are: a place of hidden knowledge, sealed until the right time. The patience of the desert. In the end, the sands do what they have always done. They wait, they cover and uncover, they protect and erase. The Sphinx has watched civilizations rise and fall, and it has kept its counsel through them all. If there is something beneath it, that something has already endured for thousands of years, it will endure for thousands more. For now, the unanswered questions remain part of the Sphinx's identity. They are as much a part of its presence as its weathered face or its massive pores. The mystery is not a flaw in our knowledge. It is the reason we keep looking. Night settles over the Giza plateau, and the great Sphinx rests in the soft, silver light of the moon. The day's heat has faded. The desert air is cool and still. In the quiet, it is easy to believe that time moves differently here, that the centuries pass, not as a rushing river, but as a slow, unbroken tide. The Sphinx has been called many things: guardian, riddle, relic, witness. It has watched empires rise and fall, sandstorms sweep across the plateau, the Nile shift its course, and strangers from distant lands stand in its shadow, with the same mixture of awe and questions. For as long as it has stood, it has been the subject of speculation. Some see in its face the image of a pharaoh, others see something older, a memory from before history began. Some believe its body hides only stone, others believe it guards a tunnel into another age. The weight of silence. If the Sphinx could speak, what would it say? Would it confirm the stories of hidden chambers and ancient archives? Or would it simply smile in the way stone smiles, unchanging, unbothered by our curiosity? Perhaps it would tell us that the answers are not as important as the search itself, that in reaching for the past, we also reach for something within ourselves, the part of us that longs for connection to those who came before, and for meaning that outlives our own brief moment in the sun. A monument of two worlds, the Sphinx belongs to both the earth and the sky. Its body is carved from the living rock, rooted in the bedrock of the plateau. Its gaze is fixed on the horizon, toward the rising sun, toward the eternal cycles of day and night. If there are tunnels beneath it, they are the hidden counterpart to this gaze, a descent to match its upward watch. Above, the light; below, the dark; above, the known; below, the unknown. The Sphinx would then be not just a guardian of the horizon, but a bridge between two worlds, holding them in balance, the human thread. The mystery of the Sphinx is also a story about us. Across cultures and centuries, we have been drawn to the idea of hidden places, treasure, caves, lost cities, secret chambers that hold truths the surface world has forgotten. These stories remind us that the past is not gone, it is merely out of sight, waiting for the right hands or the right time to uncover it. And yet sometimes the act of imagining is more powerful than the act of finding. If tomorrow the tunnels beneath the Sphinx were opened and found to be empty, would the mystery vanish, or would it simply shift to another form? The question becoming not what is there, but why was it sealed? Time's true keeper. The desert is patient, it teaches us that endurance is its own kind of truth. The Sphinx has endured more than any one lifetime, more than any single civilization. Whether or not it guards a physical chamber, it has always guarded something, the persistence of wonder. In that sense, the real treasure beneath the Sphinx is not stone or gold or scrolls, it is the curiosity it inspires. It is the way it can make us feel small in time, yet connected to a story far greater than ourselves. A final glimpse. As dawn approaches, the eastern horizon begins to brighten. The Sphinx, still and silent, faces the first light. The moment is the same as it has been for thousands of years. A new day rising, the stone guardian watching the sands, holding their secrets. Perhaps one day the ground will be opened, and the tunnels, if they exist, will see light again. Perhaps what is found will change our understanding of the past, or perhaps it will only deepen the mystery. Until then, the Sphinx will keep its watch, as it always has and as it always will. And in its silence, we may find an answer of a different kind, that not all riddles are meant to be solved and not all doors are meant to be opened in our time. End of documentary script. We began with the whisper of stone, followed the trail of history and legend, descended into theories and anomalies, and emerged here in the stillness of the Sphinx's eternal gaze. The journey has taken us from the visible to the hidden, from the ground to the stars, and back again.